"Strip down now, you're too fat for those rags," he growled. But then he wrapped her in silk, like a queen. Rain fell in furious sheets that night, the kind of storm that turned roads into rivers and prayers into whispers. Isabel Crawford staggered through the mud, soaked to the bone, clutching a small satchel to her chest. Each step up Thunder Peak tore through her lungs. Behind her lay the town of Millfield, the place that had sold her like cattle. Ahead, only darkness. She wasn't running from the rain. She was running from her father. 2 nights earlier, drunken and desperate, Harold Crawford had slapped a trembling hand of cards on the saloon table and declared, "She's all I've got left to wager." The room had fallen silent as he pointed toward his daughter, 24, soft-spoken, full-figured, with a heart too gentle for the world. And he lost. The winner was Morrison, a 60-year-old rancher with a belly full of whiskey and cruelty in his smile. Isabel had overheard every word from the stairwell, her stomach turning to ice. That night, before dawn, she fled, leaving behind the only home she'd ever known. Now the cold gnawed at her skin through the soaked fabric that clung painfully tight. Lightning ripped across the sky, illuminating a cabin in the distance. For a fleeting second, she thought she saw movement, a man's silhouette framed in the window. Her knees buckled, and the world went black. When she opened her eyes, warmth surrounded her. A fire crackled nearby, shadows dancing on the log walls. She was lying on a sofa, wrapped in a heavy quilt that smelled faintly of cedar and smoke. A deep voice rumbled from somewhere close. "You're awake." Isabel blinked through the haze. A man sat across from her, tall, broad-shouldered, his dark hair tied loosely behind his neck. His eyes, steel gray and steady, studied her not with suspicion, but concern. Where am I?" she stammered. "You're on Thunder Peak," he said. "My name's Matthias Kane." Her heart skipped. The name alone carried legend. The Devil of Thunder Peak, the reclusive doctor who'd vanished from the city after some unspeakable tragedy. "You collapsed outside my door," he said quietly. "You're lucky I found you before the cold did." Isabel shivered beneath the blanket. The rain still hammered the roof. Her dress clung heavy and wet against her body, and she flushed with embarrassment. Matthias's eyes flicked to the soaked fabric, then back to the fire. His tone shifted, low, firm, commanding. "Those clothes are killing you," he said. "Take them off, now." Isabel froze, her pulse pounding. What?" He rose to his feet, towering, his voice sharp as thunder. "You'll catch pneumonia if you stay in those rags. I'm a doctor, Miss Crawford. Don't argue. Change into something dry." He turned his back, reached into a chest, and pulled out a folded gown of soft ivory silk. "Here," he said, placing it within her reach. "It belonged to my sister." When he finally spoke again, his voice was quieter, almost tender. "I'll keep my eyes away. You have my word." Outside, the storm raged on. Inside, for the first time in years, someone's voice held no mockery, only care hidden behind command. Isabel clutched the silk in trembling hands. She didn't know it yet, but that moment, the night a stranger barked an order that sounded like cruelty, was the night she met the man who would treat her like a queen. By morning, the storm had passed, leaving the mountains veiled in white mist. A pale sun pushed through the clouds, scattering light across the window pane. Isabel awoke to the smell of broth simmering and the soft clink of porcelain. The silk gown he had given her shimmered faintly in the firelight, warm, delicate, impossibly soft. It fit her as if it had been made for her. When she ran her hand along the fabric, she thought of how no one had ever given her anything this fine. Matthias turned from the stove. "You should eat," he said, setting a tray before her, a bowl of soup, bread still steaming. "Your body's been through hell." She looked down, cheeks coloring. You didn't have to do all this for me. I did, he said simply. You'd have died outside. Isabel tried to meet his gaze, but his eyes, gray and unreadable, unsettled her. She'd heard every story about this man. Some said he'd killed his wife. Others whispered he performed experiments on people. Yet the way he moved, careful, precise, without cruelty, didn't fit the rumors. I heard people in town call you the Devil of Thunder Peak, she said softly. Matthias paused, a faint smile ghosting across his face. People love to name their monsters. It helps them sleep at night. She frowned. So it isn't true? He looked into the fire. No, but it doesn't matter. The world sees what it wants to see. For a while they ate in silence. Outside the snow melted from the trees, dripping in slow, rhythmic beats. Finally, Isabel spoke again, voice trembling. My father sold me. Matthias looked up sharply. He lost everything at the saloon, she said. The farm, the house, me. The man who won, Morrison. He was old enough to be my grandfather. When I refused to go with him, my father struck me. So I ran. Her voice cracked. He said no one would ever want a girl like me. Matthias's expression darkened. He was wrong. Her eyes widened slightly at the quiet certainty in his tone. He stood and went to the window, staring at the mist curling through the trees. When I was younger, he said, I thought cruelty was something people could be taught not to do. I became a doctor to fight it. But then my sister, Anna. He stopped, his jaw tightening. She was kind, he continued finally. Too kind. She wasn't built for a world that worships perfection. People mocked her, just like they mocked you. I tried to protect her, but words can kill too. She stopped eating, stopped smiling. One morning, she didn't wake up. The silence that followed was heavy, the kind that filled a room with grief unspoken. Isabel felt tears burning in her eyes. I'm so sorry, she whispered. Matthias exhaled. I built this place for her, or maybe for me, a place where the world's voices can't reach. He turned then, his gaze meeting hers, steady and unflinching. You're safe here, Isabel. No one will touch you. No one will speak to you like that again. She wanted to believe him. And when she looked at the silk sleeve brushing her wrist, the warm fire, and the man who'd saved her without asking for anything in return, something inside her began to thaw. Something she'd thought was long dead. For the first time in her life, she didn't feel like a burden. She felt seen. Outside, the clouds began to break, letting through slivers of light. Inside, Isabel Crawford began to believe maybe monsters weren't always the ones who lived on the mountain. The next few days on Thunder Peak were quiet, wrapped in a kind of peace Isabel had never known. The world below was far away. No jeering voices, no mocking laughter, only the whisper of the wind through the pines and the deep, steady rhythm of the man who'd taken her in. Each morning, Matthias rose before dawn. She would hear the heavy creak of the door and the sound of boots crunching snow. By the time she awoke, the fire would already be roaring and breakfast laid out on the table. Porridge sweetened with honey or roasted potatoes with herbs he grew himself. You cook? She asked one morning, surprised to see him at the stove, sleeves rolled up, hair tied loosely back. He glanced over his shoulder. A man learns a few things when there's no one else around to do them. She smiled faintly, still hesitant. You're very good at it. His lips twitched in the hint of a smile. I'm better at mending bones than baking bread, but I'll take the compliment. Over time, her strength returned. She helped where she could, tending the garden, brushing the horses, cleaning the cabin. The first time she carried a bucket of water from the well, Matthias was there within seconds, his brow furrowed. You'll hurt yourself, he warned. I'm stronger than I look, she said, breathing hard but proud. He looked at her then, really looked, and nodded slowly. Yes, you are. That afternoon they took a walk beyond the cabin. The air was crisp, the mountain alive with the scent of pine and melting snow. A hawk circled overhead, and somewhere below, a creek sang against the rocks. Isabel followed Matthias through the woods, clutching her shawl around her shoulders. "This place," she murmured, "it feels untouched by the world." "That's why I came here," he said. "No noise, no judgment." "And no people?" He stopped and turned to her, a small smile ghosting his lips. "Until you." Her breath caught. The air between them shifted, quiet but heavy with meaning. She looked down, cheeks warming. Later, as the wind picked up, Matthias threw his coat over her shoulders without a word. It was far too big, smelling faintly of cedar and smoke, and she felt absurdly small inside it, and safer than she'd ever felt in her life. That night, a storm rolled in. The wind howled against the cabin walls, and Isabel flinched at each thunderclap. Matthias added more wood to the fire, his face soft in the glow. "Storms don't last," he said quietly. "They used to scare me when I was little," she admitted. "My father would laugh and say, 'Even the sky's too loud for you, girl.'" He frowned. He was wrong about everything. For a while they sat in silence, the storm raging outside. Then Matthias stood, draping another blanket around her shoulders, the motion almost reverent. "Thank you," she whispered. "You don't need to thank me for decency," he said. "You deserve it." In the flicker of firelight, she saw something in his eyes she hadn't seen before. Not pity, but quiet admiration. When she went to sleep that night, the storm still raged, but inside the cabin, the air was warm, safe, and full of something she hadn't felt in years: hope. She didn't know it yet, but with every word, every glance, every act of unspoken kindness, Matthias Kane was slowly falling for her, and she for him. Two wounded souls, stitched together by silence, learning that even in a world that had tried to break them, gentleness could still be powerful. Winter settled deep over Thunder Peak, painting the world in white. Days bled quietly into one another, soft mornings, long evenings, and nights warmed by the crackle of the hearth. The storm that had once nearly killed Isabel now felt like a distant dream, replaced by the steady rhythm of life shared between two unlikely companions. Matthias had always lived in silence, but now the cabin was alive with gentle sound. Isabel's laughter when she burned the stew, her humming as she kneaded dough, the rustle of silk as she moved about the house. He didn't realize how much he'd missed human warmth until she brought it back into his home. "You keep this place too neat," she teased one morning, dusting the bookshelf. "It's a habit," he said without looking up from his medical journal. "From being a doctor?" "From being alone," he replied. She paused, her gaze softening. "Not anymore." He glanced up. She was standing by the window, sunlight spilling across her hair like gold fire. For the briefest moment, he forgot to breathe. They worked side by side each day. Isabel learned quickly how to tend the herbs in the garden, how to bandage a wound, how to tell time from foxglove. Matthias had never seen anyone so eager to learn or so patient with herself. When he praised her, she blushed like a schoolgirl. "I'm not very good at things," she'd murmur. "At least that's what they used to say." "They were blind," he said simply. Once, she burned her hand while baking bread. Before she could even cry out, Matthias was there, gently taking her wrist, running cool water over the skin. His hands were strong, steady, almost reverent. "You must be careful," he murmured. Her heart raced at the closeness of him, the warmth of his breath, the scent of pine and smoke that clung to him. "You worry too much," she whispered. He looked up, eyes catching hers. "Not nearly enough." That night, snow fell thick outside. They sat by the fire after supper, a book open on the table between them. Isabel read aloud, her voice soft and lilting. "Do you miss the city?" she asked suddenly. Matthias stared into the flames for a long time. "Sometimes," he said, "but every time I remember the noise, the cruelty. I remember why I left." "And now?" she pressed. "Do you ever wish you'd stayed?" He turned to her then, his expression unreadable, but his voice low and certain. "Not since the night you arrived." Isabel's lips parted, her pulse quickening. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was charged, alive, filled with words neither dared to speak. He stood abruptly, perhaps afraid of saying too much, and added another log to the fire. "You should rest," he said softly. But she didn't move. "Matthias," she said. He looked back. "Thank you for seeing me as more than what the world calls me." Something flickered in his eyes. Pain, admiration, maybe love. "Isabel, the world is full of fools. They look at the surface and call it truth. But real beauty, it's quiet. It takes time to notice." Her breath caught. When he finally turned away, she sat watching him in silence, the glow of the fire reflecting in her eyes. For the first time, she began to wonder. Maybe the man they called the Devil of Thunder Peak was really an angel who just lost his wings. Outside, the snow kept falling. Inside, two hearts, one wounded by cruelty, one buried beneath grief, began to heal each other, slowly, tenderly, inevitably. The peace on Thunder Peak did not last forever. Word has a way of traveling down mountains, and once it reaches the wrong ears, it never returns the same. By early spring, the snow had melted into rivers, and travelers passing through Millfield began whispering of a red-haired woman living with the Devil of Thunder Peak. Some said she'd been kidnapped, others claimed she'd bewitched him. By the time the gossip reached Isabel's father, it had twisted into poison. Harold Crawford sat in the saloon, the same one where he'd lost her, nursing another glass of whiskey. "That ungrateful girl," he snarled, "running off with that madman after everything I've done for her." Everything he'd done, selling her like property. Even drunk, he could not see his own sin. When Morrison heard the rumor too, his pride flared hotter than Harold's greed. "He stole what was mine," he growled, slamming his fist on the table. "The girl was payment. I'll get her back and make him regret crossing me." The two men rode out together, a small group of hired hands behind them. The path up Thunder Peak was steep and narrow, but rage can drive a man where reason cannot. Up on the mountain, Isabel was tending to the garden when Matthias returned from checking his traps. His usual calm was gone. His face was tense. "What's wrong?" she asked. He hesitated. "Riders, coming up from the valley. I saw them halfway down the ridge." Her heart dropped. "My father?" He nodded once. "And the man who bought you?" Fear clawed at her chest, but she forced herself to breathe. "They'll kill you if they can." "I've dealt with worse," he said quietly. "Please, Matthias." He took her hands, steadying her. "Listen to me. I will not let them take you. You're not theirs anymore. You're not anyone's property." Tears burned behind her eyes. "But they'll twist it. They'll say I'm—" "Let them talk," he interrupted, voice fierce now. "You know who you are. That's all that matters." As dusk fell, the sound of hooves echoed through the clearing. Isabel stood behind the cabin window, trembling, while Matthias stepped out into the open, the wind whipping his coat. Harold dismounted first, his face red and bloated with drink. Morrison followed, flanked by two armed men. "Where's the girl?" Morrison barked. "She belongs to me." Matthias's voice was low, controlled. "She belongs to no one." "She's my daughter," Harold shouted. "You think you can just keep her here like some whore?" Matthias's gray eyes hardened. You sold her for whiskey, Mr. Crawford. Don't speak of love now. Give her back, Morrison snarled, spitting into the snow. Or I'll take her. The men behind him raised their rifles. Inside, Isabel pressed her palms against the glass, heart pounding. For a moment she saw Matthias not as the quiet doctor or the gentle man who brewed her tea, but as something larger. The storm made flesh. He didn't flinch. Put your guns down, he warned. You take one more step, and this mountain will be your grave. The standoff held for a heartbeat that felt like eternity. Then, from inside the cabin, Isabel's voice rang out, clear, trembling, but fierce. Stop! She burst through the door, running to stand beside Matthias. Her dress whipped in the wind, her hair wild and shining in the last light. You'll have to shoot us both, she said, chin lifted, because I'm not leaving him. Harold's mouth fell open. Morrison's sneer faltered. Matthias reached for her hand and squeezed it once. Silent, steady. The moment broke something in the men before them. They saw it then. The truth neither rumor nor cruelty could erase. The girl they'd called worthless stood proud beside the man they'd called a monster. Morrison spat again, muttering a curse, then yanked his reins. Let the fools rot up here. He turned his horse and rode off into the storm. Harold stayed a moment longer, shame flickering across his face before he followed. When the last echo of hooves faded, Isabel sagged against Matthias, shaking. It's over, he murmured, wrapping his arms around her. No, she whispered into his chest. It's only beginning. The next morning dawned gray and heavy, a curtain of mist wrapping the mountain in silence. Yet the air between them felt alive, tense, electric, like the calm before a second storm. Isabel sat by the fire, staring into the flames that danced across the logs. Her fingers trembled as she held the cup Matthias had handed her. He watched her from across the room, knowing what she was thinking before she spoke. They'll come back, she said quietly. Men like them never walk away empty-handed. Matthias set his rifle on the table, the metal glinting in the morning light. Then they'll find the mountain less forgiving next time. She looked up sharply. You can't fight them alone. I won't have to, he said. You're stronger than you think, Isabel. Her throat tightened. I was never strong before I met you. He crossed the room slowly, the firelight catching the silver strands in his dark hair. No, he murmured, stopping in front of her. You were strong all along. You just needed someone to see it. He reached out, brushing his thumb against her cheek. It was the first time he'd ever touched her face, and she leaned into it without fear. I thought I was broken, she whispered. Matthias shook his head. You were never broken. The world was. That night, the riders returned. They came under cover of darkness, 4 of them, with Morrison at the lead. The dogs barked before Isabel even heard the hooves. Matthias was already on his feet, gun in hand, his expression calm and deadly. Stay inside, he ordered. She gripped his sleeve. No, I won't hide this time. Their eyes met, and in that instant, he understood. She was done running. Together they stepped out into the cold night. Snow crunched beneath their boots, and the moon hung full and bright over the clearing. Morrison sneered from his saddle. You should have given her back when you had the chance, Doctor. Matthias didn't move. You've got 2 choices, Morrison. Leave this mountain alive, or stay here forever. You think you can scare me? Morrison laughed, raising his gun. You're just one man. Then aim true, Matthias said softly. For a heartbeat, the world froze. Then the gun went off, a single echo rolling through the peaks. Morrison's hand jerked as Matthias's bullet shattered the barrel of his revolver clean from his grasp. The other men drew their weapons, but Isabel stepped forward before they could fire, her voice cutting through the night. Stop it, she shouted. I'm not your property. I'm not anyone's." Her words rang clear, fierce, carried by the mountain wind. Even the horses stilled. Morrison glared at her, breathing hard. "You'll regret defying me, girl." Matthias moved between them like a shadow. "She'll regret nothing," he said, "but if you take one more step toward her, you won't have the chance to regret anything again." The way he said it, quiet, measured, absolute, made even the hired guns hesitate. Finally, Morrison spat into the snow. "Keep your fat witch," he snarled, "but you'll both rot up here." He turned his horse, fury in every line of his body, and rode off into the trees. The others followed, the echo of their hooves fading into the darkness until only the whisper of the wind remained. Matthias lowered his gun slowly, chest heaving. Isabel stood frozen, her breath visible in the cold air. Then, as the danger ebbed, something inside her broke loose. The fear, the anger, the disbelief. She threw herself into his arms, and he caught her effortlessly. "It's over," he murmured into her hair. "You're safe now." "No," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I'm free." He drew back just enough to meet her gaze. "You've been free since the moment you walked through my door." The moonlight turned her tears to silver. "And you?" she asked softly. "What are you, Matthias Kane? My savior or my captor?" He smiled faintly, brushing a curl from her face. "Neither," he said. "I'm just the man who will love you for the rest of his days, if you'll let me." She didn't answer with words. She rose on her toes and kissed him, slow and sure, the snow swirling around them like a benediction. In that frozen moment, the world's cruelty seemed small, distant, nothing but noise against the quiet heartbeat of the mountain. The storm passed, and the mountain slowly bloomed again beneath the spring sun. The snow melted into crystal streams, wildflowers pushed through the thawing ground, and the cabin that once stood as a fortress now felt like a home, bright, open, alive. Isabel tended to the garden while Matthias repaired the wooden fence, both working in comfortable silence. The past weeks had been hard, but peace had returned, the kind of peace earned through struggle, not granted by mercy. One morning, as she hung linens by the line, she caught sight of Matthias standing by the porch, watching her. He wasn't smiling, but the way he looked at her, steady, full of quiet pride, made her heart ache in the sweetest way. "What is it?" she asked, brushing a strand of hair from her face. He stepped closer, holding something behind his back. "You once said you'd never had anything that was truly yours," he said, "that no one had ever given you something just because they wanted to." She frowned slightly, confused. "Matthias." He revealed a small wooden box, carved with delicate vines and tiny wildflowers, her favorite. When she opened it, a silver ring gleamed inside, simple yet beautiful, engraved with a single word, "Always." Her breath caught. "Matthias." He took the ring, then took her trembling hand. "Isabel Crawford," he said, his deep voice softening. "I've spent half my life in silence, and I thought I preferred it that way. But now I know. I was just waiting for the right voice to fill it. Will you marry me?" Her eyes filled with tears before she could speak. "Yes," she whispered. 1,000 times, yes." He smiled then, a real smile, rare and radiant, like sunlight breaking through the clouds. A month later, the peaks above them glistened with the last snow of spring. The air smelled of pine and lilac as Isabel walked out of the cabin in a gown sewn from soft cream fabric that shimmered in the morning light. There was no crowd, no orchestra, no judge or preacher from the valley. Only Matthias, standing beneath an arch of blooming mountain laurel, his gray eyes brighter than she'd ever seen. He reached for her hand, voice rough with emotion. "You came here a ghost," he said, but you've filled this mountain with life again. You've given me something I never thought I'd have, a reason to believe the world can still be good." She smiled through her tears. "And you gave me something I never dreamed of, a home not made of walls, but of love." They spoke no vows beyond that. Words, they both knew, were too small for what they felt. So Matthias simply slid the ring onto her finger and pressed his forehead to hers. When he kissed her, the wind stirred around them, carrying the scent of pine and the sound of the river far below. Years later, the townsfolk would speak of the strange doctor on Thunder Peak who lived with the red-haired woman everyone once pitied. They would say she became more beautiful with each passing season, and that his eyes softened whenever she entered the room. Children would whisper about the Silk Queen of the Mountain, not knowing the truth, that she had once arrived in rags, trembling and lost. Inside the cabin, laughter replaced silence. The woman who had once been called too much now filled the world of one man completely, and the man they had called a monster learned that gentleness, not strength, is what saves a soul. As the sun set behind the ridge, Isabel sat with Matthias by the fire, her head resting on his shoulder. Their hands were intertwined, their hearts steady in the stillness. "This is all I ever wanted," she whispered. He kissed her hair and murmured, "You were all I ever needed." The flames danced, the wind sighed through the pines, and Thunder Peak, once a place of solitude and sorrow, became a home touched by the quiet, eternal grace of love. If you're still here, listening to Isabel and Matthias's story, maybe it's because, deep down, you still believe in love that heals, not hurts. Love that sees through scars, weight, or past mistakes, and simply says, "You are enough." Every time I tell these stories, I'm reminded that kindness can come from the unlikeliest hearts. A quiet man on a lonely mountain, a woman the world called too much, a moment of mercy in the cold. If you've ever felt unseen, unwanted, or unworthy, this story is a reminder. You deserve warmth, not pity. You deserve someone who looks at you and doesn't see what the world mocks, but what your soul carries, strength, courage, and beauty. Because sometimes the people we call monsters are the ones who love the purest. And sometimes the ones the world tries to break end up building the strongest homes. So tell me, where are you listening from tonight? Somewhere cold and quiet like Thunder Peak? Or somewhere warm, where the sound of rain hits the window softly? Wherever you are, thank you for believing in stories like this one, the stories where broken people find each other and love makes them whole again. And if you still believe that love can change everything, then stay with me, because the next story might just be yours.